Starting off this countdown, we have Heaven's Gate. Found in 1974 and led by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite, the Heaven's Gate cult believed in UFOs and impending doom. They convinced their followers that the only way they could escape this was by taking their own lives. By doing this, they believed that they would reach the next level and help evolution on other planets. And according to them, Jesus was an extraterrestrial, and when he died, his body rose from the dead before being carried away by a spaceship. Interesting, I know. In 1997, 39 members took their lives, and they were all found wearing arm patches that read "Heaven's Gate Away Team." Moving on to number 9, we have the Church Universal and Triumphant. The Church Universal and Triumphant was founded in 1975. It was run by a woman named Elizabeth Clare Prophet. She made her followers believe that she was a channel for God. Apparently, God told her that the world was going to end, so she moved her church compound near Yellowstone National Park for safety reasons. She said that the end of the world would come in 1990 after a nuclear war between the US and Russia. When that didn't happen, a lot of members left the cult. Slowly over time, the cult just dissolved. In our 8th spot, we have William Miller. William Miller was an American Baptist preacher as well as the founder of Adventism. He was known for preaching about the end of the world, which he prophesied would be in 1844. He thought the end would come as a purifying apocalypse so the world would be cleansed of sinners. Miller and his followers, the Millerites, believed that there would be a fire in which saints would be resurrected and they would cleanse the world of this evil. When this didn't happen, he lost his loyal followers. In fact, the day in which the world didn't end is now referred to as the Great Disappointment. In our 7th spot, we have Jim Jones. Jim Jones is known as one of the most famous cult leaders in the world. He was the founder and leader of the People's Temple, which he ran in an isolated area in the Guyanese jungle. He convinced his followers that the government was coming for him and that they were going to start a thermonuclear war. In fact, he believed that on July 15, 1967, a nuclear attack was going to happen. Alas, it didn't. Anyways, in 1978, he convinced his followers to take their lives. He described this to be a revolutionary act. So on November 18th, his cult leaders drank cyanide-laced punch. Some of them drank it willingly, while others had it forced upon them. In the end, 909 people lost their lives. It was said to be one of the most harrowing tragedies in American history. Coming in at number 6, we have the Branch Davidians. This cult was originally founded in 1929 by a man named Victor T. Houteff, and they were a spin-off of the Seventh-day Adventists. Then in 1955, Ben Roden organized the Branch Davidians. Later, the cult was controlled by David Koresh. He believed that the end was near. He believed in the several seals from the Bible's book of Revelation. He believed that when the seals were opened, that marked the second coming of Christ and the start of the apocalypse. So David and his cult were preparing for the apocalypse. He claimed that he could speak to God, and that's what God told him to do, to prepare. But things ended badly in 1993 when the FBI and military stormed the cult's base. They had belief that the group was stockpiling illegal weapons, so they conducted a raid. This led to a deadly shootout and ended with their building going up in flames. This resulted in the death of 76 cult members. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Russian Doomsday Cult. The Russian Doomsday Cult was founded by a man named Pyotr Kuznetsov. He believed that the end of the world was going to happen in 2008. So in 2007, he gathered the 30 members of his group and sent them to a shelter in a cave. He instructed them to wait there until the end of the world. Of course, Pyotr didn't accompany them. After 6 months in the cave, 14 members decided to come out. Sadly, 2 passed away in this cave. 9 members decided to stay a bit longer, but then later came out. In fact, the members were instructed to take their own lives if the authorities tried to intervene. Thankfully, when the police did come to the rescue, they didn't do that. As for Pyotr, well, he tried to take his own life when his doomsday prediction didn't come true. He then was sent to a psychiatric facility. In our 4th spot, we have The Family. Otherwise known as the Great White Brotherhood, this was an Australian New Age group led by a woman named Anne Hamilton. She convinced her followers that she was the reincarnation of Jesus. She also said that Buddha and Krishna were other spiritual beings that came down to help humanity. And of course, they all believed that the end was near. The cult lived away together in the countryside outside of Melbourne. The kids were instructed to never talk to outside people. They were all homeschooled. Those that didn't listen were punished through beatings, starvation, or emotional torture. People there were also frequently drugged with hallucinogenics. In the end, the police raided the cult and saved the 28 children that they had brought in. Anne and the other woman helping her were then criminally charged. And a number of cult members actually sued her for psychiatric and psychological illness upon other things. It said that she paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to her victims. Moving on to number 3, we have Box Canyon Cult. Located in Southern California, Box Canyon was the perfect rocky hideaway for a doomsday cult. It all started when a man who went by the name of Krishna Venta claimed that he was the second coming of Christ and was over 240,000 years old. In 1948, he bought 25 acres of land in Box Canyon to build a monastery and several rooms for his followers to stay in. In the monastery, Venta would preach about the impending World War III, which would spark the end of the world. He said that World War III was their chance to take back the world, but they were never able to see their plan through. In 1958, 2 men whose wives joined the cult decided to bomb it. The blast killed them, Venta, and 7 of the followers. Some of the survivors stayed there, whereas others went to join Jim Jones's cult and later passed away there. In our second spot, we have the Order of the Solar Temple. This cult was formed in 1984 by Joseph DiMambro and Luc Jouret. It started off its teachings based on New Age spiritualism, but they realized that they got more followers when they started to become more doomsday focused. And then these followers brought them more money, so they loved that. So they believed that once the end of the world came, they would be transported to another planet and then live there. Now, the history of what went down in this cult is very complex, so I'm just gonna do a quick rundown. In the 1990s, authorities started to investigate this group. In 1994, a man and his family were killed after speaking out about the cult. Days later, 2 temple buildings in Switzerland burned to the ground. 48 bodies were found inside. Some were shot, others were injected with tranquilizers and left to perish in the fire. Then in 1995, a building in the Swiss Alps burnt down. 16 bodies were found inside there. Then in 1997, a building in Quebec burnt down. 5 more members died then. In total, 74 cult members passed away. To this day though, this cult still exists. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Shinrikyo Cult. The Shinrikyo Cult was founded in 1984 by a man named Shoko Ashihara. Members of this cult believed that the end of the world was near. The leader predicted that it would occur in 1996 or between 1999 and 2003. But he claimed that the members were going to be the only ones that survived. But in order to become a member, they would have to sign their estates over to the group, which in the end made him incredibly wealthy. In 1995, the cult carried out the deadly Tokyo subway sarin attack, where 13 people died and thousands got injured. Apparently, this was done as an attempt to start the apocalypse, but also to show how strong they were to try and stop the authorities from shutting down their cult. As a result of this attack, 13 members of the group got the death sentence, including the leader. After his death, the name of the cult changed, and to this day, it's still active. It's said that it has about 1,500 active followers.
Number 10. The Freedomites. After the Tsarist persecution in Russia, a group of pacifist, anti-materialist Christians, referred to as spirit warriors, fled the country and came to Canada in the 20th century. While many were happy to just live freely off the land, a section of the group grew unhappy at the Canadians for asking them to attend school and enlist in the military. This group called themselves the Sons of Freedom, or Freedomites, and despite their name, wanted to impose their way of belief on others. They were most famous for their dislike of materialism and would often show this by protesting in the complete nude. Many photos of the group of farmers marching in the nude became pretty famous and put the religion on the map. They didn't simply protest in the nude though. They took to another more violent outlet, arson, burning down many buildings including homes, schools, courtrooms, and bridges. This led to the persecution of the entire group, including the peaceful ones who hadn't been involved, and they were pretty much wiped out of the country. Number 9. Angel's Landing. Daniel Perez led the Angel's Landing cult for 15 years. They traveled from state to state and had a large commune on Daniel's property near Wichita. Things overall didn't seem too bad for people looking in, but but suspicions were raised when there were a number of so-called accidental deaths, and Daniel always seemed to be coming into large amounts of money. As it turns out, Daniel Perez actually had been responsible for the deaths that had taken place in the group, and he had been using it as a ploy to collect their life insurance money, collecting millions of dollars over the years. However, he wouldn't be able to get away with it forever when one young member of the group returned to the police to tell her that she had actually lied about one of the deaths being accidental. After he was found responsible and arrested, he was finally put on trial in 2015, being charged with a total of 28 different crimes. Number 8. The Ant Hill Kids. The Ant Hill Kids were in existence for 8 years, and at their peak had a following of only 12 adults and 26 children. Rock Therio created the group when he believed that the world was going to end in 1979, and as with most leaders, gained his followers through his charisma and looks. He moved them to a place in Quebec where they started building a town, working together like a group of ants and coining their name. Over time, the leader became violent due to his excessive drinking, and would perform drunken surgeries on the cult members in attempts to prove that he could heal them, but always doing much more harm than good. One of his many wives managed to escape the horrible conditions and went to the police about what had happened, Rock being arrested 6 weeks later. His arrest ended the group and he went away for life in prison, dying in 2011 at the hands of a fellow inmate. Number 6. Synanon. In 1958, Synanon was opened in Santa Monica, and it would be active there for over 30 years, having 1,300 members at its peak. This group mainly recruited addicts and took many different forms over its lifespan: a rehabilitation program, a utopian society, and a church. It was created by Charles Dedrich, and its staples were its focus on quitting cold turkey, tough love, and something called the game, where one member of the group opens up and the rest verbally attack them. Hundreds of people eventually moved in and paid to live there, Synanon at one point having around $33 million in assets. But Charles' greed and hunger for power only continued to grow, and the conditions in the place worsened over time, facing accusations of things like abduction and brainwashing. The lawsuit placed and won made Charles so angry that he got his followers to put a venomous snake in the man's mailbox, the man barely surviving. He was eventually arrested, and Synanon was shut down for the allegations and for tax fraud. Number 4. Demas Kanjang. Demas Kanjang was able to form a cult fairly easily. The leaders of these types of groups will usually try to convince you of something, whether it be that they are an alien or have magical healing powers. Demas did this by convincing people that he could pull money out of thin air, and the way that he did it is incredibly simple. You can see videos of him demonstrating this online. He simply puts his hands behind his back, and then brings them forward with money in them, obviously having just kept the money behind his back. But it was somehow still enough to convince people that he had magic powers, sometimes pulling not just money from the air, but also meatballs and plastic bags of soup. He somehow managed to amass thousands of followers and almost $38 million in donations, even coming from high-ranking members of the military and people in government. When two of his followers realized that he was eventually going to run out of money to pull from behind his back, they confronted him, and he responded by having them both killed. He was arrested and convicted in 2016 and still has another 12 years to serve. Number 3. Scientology. The so-called Church of Scientology was developed by L. Ron Hubbard and surrounds the idea that humans have trauma preventing them from experiencing life properly, and that they must work towards a spiritual state called clear. Their teaching surrounds a few different truths, some of them being listed as: man is an immortal spiritual being. His experience extends well beyond a single lifetime. His capabilities are unlimited, even if not presently realized. They also believe in an alien called Xenu who brought all his buddies to Earth 75 million years ago and blew them up next to a volcano, which, makes sense. You've probably heard about Scientology because of just how many celebrities are connected to it. Its members include people like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, and Kirstie Alley. Scientology is incredibly controversial, mostly due to the reports of them brainwashing their members and the evidence that the cult had been created for the express purpose of making money. Number 1. The FLDS. If you've been browsing through Netflix recently, then you've probably seen the limited series called Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey. The series documents the history of the group called the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, or FLDS for short. It chronicles the series of people who have managed to escape from the group, which broke off from Mormonism in the 1930s after polygamy was outlawed. It was led by ruling Jeffs, but things apparently didn't get too bad until his son, Warren Jeffs, took over, dissipating the council and taking complete control over the group. Many terrible things happened throughout their history, and if you want the full details, feel free to watch the series. I really do recommend it. It included things like psychological blackmail, separating children from their families to be sent to do labor on a supposed utopia in Texas, and more. Things came to a head in a 2008 raid of the compound and Jeffs went to prison, but the group is still active today, with Jeffs still giving teachings from behind bars.
In our number 8 spot, we have the Children of God. Also known as Teens for Christ, it was founded in 1968 by preacher David Berg in California. It attracted the hippies of the day, as this cult preached the words of Jesus and the Bible, but with more of an open twist to the free love movement of the time. There were horrible ritual acts such as the one that was called flirty fishing, where women would perform acts of giving themselves in different inappropriate ways to get men into the cult. Mainly everyone in the cult didn't work, and there were about 15,000 members around the world. Allegedly, actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan grew up in Children of God communes. Pretty wild. In our number 7 spot, we have the NXIVM Cult. This is a cult that was run by a guy by the name of Keith Raniere, and he started this cult in 1998. It was alive for 20 years till 2018, when he was sentenced to life in prison. Positioned as a health and wellness organization, within the organization was a dark cult where women were recruited and called slaves, and they would refer to Keith as their master. Anyways, when they were being initiated into the cult, a ritual was performed where Keith would brand these women with his initials in their pelvic area. Each woman was instructed to say, "Master, please brand me, it would be an honor." Well, that's horrifying. Coming up at our number 1 spot, we have whatever cult Angelina Jolie once spoke about. Okay, so there is a Hollywood cult that Angelina Jolie was once caught on camera speaking about to her friends in 1999. The video surfaced online in 2006. The name of the cult was never mentioned, but the details of one of the rituals that is performed is pretty terrifying. We can imagine that it's some Hollywood cult, I'm sure there's a bunch, as she mentions that it's a sort of celeb initiation that is often misunderstood as a form of sadism and masochism combined. Apparently, Angelina talks about her experience and how during the ritual, the initiated people are tied up and tortured, and acts of inappropriate touching are performed, if you catch my drift. She then talks about how she got a tattoo after the ritual and how she had to kill a snake as a sacrifice. Anyways, I wish I knew what cult this was, but I have no idea, so we're going to continue to call it the cult that Angelina Jolie once spoke about.